It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our sufferings, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crucified, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Words from Isaiah. I was fortunate enough to visit Israel a good few years ago now. One of my memories is of the place of the skull. As I remembered, it was a grey rock with the shape of a face on it. Our guide explained that along the top would have run a road or a thoroughfare of some sort, and it was the custom of the Romans to crucify people along such roads, so they would be seen by as many as possible. Usually, the cross, possibly the trunk of a tree with a crossbeam, would be at the same height of those as those walking past, which would enable them to mock, spit at, and throw things at those being crucified. And along with the excruciatingly painful suffocation came the humiliation of being naked. We don't know the precise place of Jesus' crucifixion, but wherever it took place, he did endure a brutal death reserved for criminals and nationalist guerrillas. Mark tells us that Jesus was crucified between two bandits, revolutionaries. Jesus' crime, according to the Romans, that he had claimed to be King of the Jews. That claim was written on a placard and nailed to the cross. This was the man who taught his followers to love one another as he loved them, who healed the sick, cured the lame and the blind and the deaf. He fed multitudes, spiritually and physically. The man who was given the task of bringing God's kingdom to humankind. This was Jesus. As Christians, we recognize Jesus Christ as a servant representing God's people, taking their guilt upon himself. He suffered for them. He justified them, and he healed their relationships with God. He bore the iniquity of us all and justified many. Jesus was the Christ, the Jewish Messiah, who represented all of God's Old Testament people. He suffered because they suffered. Yet Jesus is our Messiah as well, who represents us. He suffered because we suffer. He suffered because of the sins of humanity. As he approached the cross, he was exposed to the power struggles and the political intrigue of the religious leaders. He was exposed to the jeers of the crowd and the cruelty of the Roman soldiers. On the cross, he was exposed to the disgrace associated with the cross, where criminals hung in shame. He died in pain, physical, emotional, and spiritual pain, exposed by the sins of people like you and me. He didn't mitigate the pain of suffering by drinking drugged wine. He chose instead to drink the cup that his Father had given him. His shame and humiliation are complete when the soldiers strip him of his clothes and gamble for them as depicted in Psalm 22. A psalm of suffering, but vindicated, a righteous man, which resonated with the early church later on. And he was crucified with two bandits, one on his right, one on his left, the very positions of honour for which the disciples had earlier competed. The taunts of the bystanders reflect Psalm 22. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with deepest grief. We have turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised, and we have been indifferent.